Welcome to the Busy Signal. My name is Jim, and this is my Retro-Stalgic 80s, 90s, and early 2000s podcast. This show aims to salute all the stuff from back in the day that is either now extinct or quickly going that way. It's 1991, and your faux wooden alarm clock has just gone off. There's that bird out there again. What is that bird? Never mind. You've got a little over an hour before the bus comes to take you to school. All of your homework is done and secured in your brand new Mead Trapper Keeper. Maybe you can get about 20 minutes of Super Mario Bros. 3 in before your mom calls you down for breakfast. You just hit level 4 and the Goombas are giant. This episode is all about sounds. The nostalgic sounds that hit you right in the feels and rip you from the present and drop you right back in your childhood. Some of these sounds may be extinct, rare, or still around and get you every time you hear them. Here I've assembled a list of sounds that are superimposed in my subconsciousness that open up doors to my memory every time I hear them and take me right back to when I was a kid. As always, they are in no particular order. Now let's see if any of these sounds take you back to. Doves. Yes, doves. Doves are kind of having a moment right now in the retro nostalgic community, so I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention them, because when I think about it, yes, doves are a nostalgic sound, because when you're growing up and you're a kid and you're playing outside, and I loved to play outside when I was a kid, the dove was always there in the background. I just never really focused on that. But if I ever zoned out, or if I was watching nature of some sort, looking at bugs or trying to catch a frog or whatever else, there was always a dove there. If I'm just sitting in my room and the window's open and it's the summertime, you're hearing doves. You wake up in the morning, there's doves. You just always hear them. They're there. But I never bothered to find out what that was. And now they're kind of making the rounds in memes and, dramatizations of past stuff where people are pretending that you wake up and it's 1999 and there's the dove in the background. You can always hear it. So people are kind of nostalgic for doves right now. And it's true. They were always there. They are the soundtrack to the outside. So thank you, doves. And next time you hear a dove, you'll know it was a dove if you didn't already know. Next up is alarm clocks. But not just like any alarm clocks, the faux wooden alarm clocks that, your parents probably gave you when it was time for you to have an alarm clock. And they would go upgrade to a more, modern alarm clock. These things were not small. They were rectangular, and they took up a lot of real estate on your end table, your nightstand. They were completely indestructible, so you would go ahead and you would bang on it in the morning, you would throw it, you would toss it across the room, you would, spike it on the floor, anything to get that alarm to shut up. But it was okay, because that alarm clock wasn't going anywhere. It could take it with its faux wood. For some reason, I think the faux wood was kind of like bulletproof glass. You could bang on that thing with a hammer, and it wasn't gonna break. It was a rather effective alarm clock. It was a really annoying alarm. And if you were lucky, it also had an FM AM radio on it, not just that alarm. So you could choose not to do the annoying alarm. You could choose to have, your favorite radio station, your favorite morning show wake you up. I'm pretty sure that there are several of these still out there, still in use somewhere, and they're still operating just fine because they could probably survive a nuclear winter. But for a lot of us, these were our first alarm clocks, so we salute the faux wooden alarm clocks. Which brings me to my next old, indestructible thing, rotary phones. And we've technically covered rotary phones in one of the once common, now extinct episodes. However, I only really talked about rotary phones as just not existing anymore. This time we're talking about the sounds. They were big, they were clunky, they took forever to dial, and when they dialed, you had to rotate the dial on it, and it sounded a lot like this. Problem was, if you made a mistake, you had to redial the whole number, and it took time. And there were things like, if you wanted to call 1-800 such and such, you still had to spell it out with that rotary dial. So it was kind of like prehistoric T9. And the ring was always the same. It was the same type of ring. The best part about these phones was they were not powered by, an outlet. They were powered just over the phone line. So if the power did go out, the phone still worked. My family had a black one, and I have no idea when we switched from the rotary phone to the corded wall phone with the long cord that went like the length of the house so you could shut the door behind you and still have plenty of cord to walk around your room. Probably sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, but we still held on to that rotary phone because if the power went out, that phone still worked. And there was nothing more satisfying than hanging up a rotary phone. If you were mad, man, slamming that thing down, that was satisfying. When you slammed down that receiver, you really felt like I showed them. And piggybacking on the rotary phone, busy signals. Yes, the inspiration for this podcast. That is what this podcast was based off of, the busy signal, because I was at work one day and I needed to call somebody. And I got this sound coming over the phone that I didn't, I recognized it, but I couldn't remember what it was called. And I'm like, I've heard this before. I know what this is. I know what it means. I know that it means somebody else is on the other line, but I totally just threw out the name of it. And I had to ask a coworker, this noise, what is this? And they're like, oh, it's a busy signal. I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot what it was called. I hadn't heard a busy signal in well over a decade or more. I mean, everybody has call waiting, right? I mean, call waiting essentially wiped out the need for a busy signal. So for somebody to have a busy signal means they don't have call waiting. So wow, it just blew my mind and totally just sat me back in my chair. And I was like, wow, I totally forgot that busy signal. I lived with busy signals my whole life. I didn't remember them ever going away, but they had, and somebody out there still has one. It's weird. So yeah, that was the basis for this podcast, was the busy signal. And here on episode number 12, we're finally talking about the origin story of the busy signal as a podcast, which makes me ask you guys, when's the last time you heard a busy signal other than this podcast? When is the last time you called somebody and there was a busy signal and you couldn't leave a message? You just had to hang up old school and wait a while and then say, well, maybe they're off the phone now, and call them back. That was kind of wild how you had to do that. You couldn't just leave a message while they were on the phone. Yes, having to blow in the Nintendo cartridge to get it to work in your Nintendo Entertainment System. This is a sound that really is specific, that anybody who grew up having just a regular old NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, knows about the blowing in the cartridge to get your game to work. Why this happens, I don't know, because I don't know where all the dust would come from, because sometimes I'd have Super Mario 3 sitting in my Nintendo, and I'd play it, and I'd shut it off, and I'd come back a day later, start it up, but it wouldn't start. I'd have to take the cartridge out, blow in it, put it back in, press power, and then it would work. But it wasn't out of the Nintendo. It was in the Nintendo the whole time, protected from dust. But that's just how it worked. Or sometimes you could take a little rubbing alcohol and put it on a Q-tip and then wipe the cartridge contacts down. That would work. But blowing in the cartridge is a sound that it's ingrained in our brains. If you blow in a cartridge, everybody knows, hey, it's time to play Nintendo. You only had to do it for Nintendo cartridges, not Super Nintendo, not Nintendo 64. I don't even think it was a Genesis thing. It was literally just Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES. And as long as we're on Nintendo, let's just talk about the Super Mario Brothers themes. I don't care. All of them. 1, 2, 3, and Super Mario World. Those are super nostalgic. If you hear even a little bit of it, a couple notes, you can hum the rest of it, and you'll probably be humming the rest of it for a week. And the levels too. Some of the levels just had their own bangers, just the underwater worlds, or if you were in the desert, or if you were in a castle, those songs are just fantastic. And if you weren't a Nintendo kid, Sega had some good ones too. I would say, that noise with Sega. That's huge for nostalgia. Or just, Sonic the Hedgehog. That music was fantastic music for video games at the time. And I will be working on a retro games episode, maybe a few of them. This isn't going to be a retro games podcast, but there will definitely be retro games sprinkled in here every once in a while. And we'll probably include a friend of the podcast, Corey Oates, probably get him back here to talk about retro games as well. Now, time to talk about a sound that I really didn't care for, but is still nostalgic, if that makes sense. And that's the recorder. For me, I was handed a recorder in 3rd grade, so that would have been 1990, in music class, of course. And I was told to practice one song, only one song. I don't remember ever being taught any other song other than Hot Cross Buns, which is suspiciously similar to Three Blind Mice. And my mom hated it. She actually kicked me out of the house during one of my jam sessions. I don't remember being tested on the recorder, on my skills. I don't ever remember anybody in my class being tested. We just had to learn Hot Cross Buns, and we played it together all the time. And I never learned to play any other instrument. So if you handed me a recorder today, I wouldn't be able to play you a single note of Hot Cross Buns, not one bit. And I can still hear it in my head every once in a while. And around Easter time, when you go to the grocery store and there's Hot Cross Buns for sale, yeah, I hear it and I hate it. It might have been the most useless thing I ever learned in grade school, period. And it's now stuck in my brain and I can't get it out. So recorder, I don't salute you. I don't miss you. But if I were to hear it, and I still hear it sometimes just in my own head, it takes me back. And then I quickly get the heck out of there. Moving on to the future, Windows XP. In 2001, Microsoft Windows XP was released. And at this point, computers in the home were the norm, where they had not been about 10 years earlier. Windows 95 was a big deal because for those that did have computers, it gave the computer a graphical user interface rather than this just black with green text or white text that we knew prior. But Windows XP gave us the internet. You could do it a little bit on Windows 98, but really, most people probably connected to the internet for the first time through Windows XP. From baby boomers to Gen X, millennials, and early Gen Z. Probably first time connecting to the internet was on a Windows XP computer. So we're all super familiar with those sounds, the startup sound and the shutdown sound. And then as soon as we got on, what were we doing? We were connecting to the internet. And a lot of times we didn't have the high-speed internet that we do these days. We had dial-up internet. This sound was also the future. It was your access to the World Wide Web. And I'll tell you what, it was also super obnoxious. Especially late at night if you were trying to get on Instant Messenger. I don't care how many blankets, how many pillows you threw at your computer, you were not going to stop it from waking up your parents to let them know that you were on the computer, on the internet after hours. And all you were doing was trying to get online to see if any of your friends were also online. That's it. Or check your email, which you didn't have any. You weren't very popular. You didn't have email. And nowadays you wish you still didn't have email because you get way too many emails unsolicited. And outside of a fax machine these days, you really don't hear that dial-up internet sound. Yes, I said fax machines. They are still in use way too much for the year 2024, but they're still out there. And outside of a fax machine, you really don't hear that dial-up anymore. And we're thankful for that because we can just be on the internet. We don't have to dial in anymore. Thank goodness. But as I've mentioned AIM, we're going to go back to AIM. And yes, we have covered AIM definitely before in Once Common Now Extinct 2. And we did cover the sound of the AIM, but we got to include it again because I don't know if I could ever hear that sound enough. It was a great sound and it brings me back. So if you want the commentary, go back and listen to that episode. But right now, I'm just here to play the sounds for you. So enjoy. So you're sitting at the family computer on a Friday night. And you just fired up that XP. You're on Instant Messenger. You're logged on. You've got your chat message up. You are checking out everybody's away messages. And then this happens. Remember that sound? That speaker interference. That was predicting the immediate future. You were about to get a phone call. A cell phone call. Yep, on your Nokia 3310 cell phone. The Nokia 3310 was pretty much just as indestructible as faux wooden alarm clocks and old rotary phones. You could drop it in the toilet. You could drop it off a building. You could run it over with a car. You could not charge it for a week, and it was still working. You could play Snake on it for hours and never need to plug it in. And that Nokia ringtone takes you right back. You don't hear it anymore, so here it is for you. Oh, and that phone call that you just got that your computer speakers just predicted? That was your best friend. I mentioned it was Friday night. They were calling you to tell you to turn on ABC because it's TGIF.
It's Friday night and the mood is right. We're gonna have some fun, show you how it's done, TGIF.
That's right. TGIF on ABC, aka the best night in TV. Full House, Perfect Strangers, Family Matters, Dinosaur, Boy Meets World, Sabrina, all of that. Talk about heavy hitters. There were a bunch of other shows too that I'm probably forgetting, but we were all sitting down watching TGIF on Friday nights. And then, if you weren't too cool for cartoons, you woke up on Saturday morning, and sometimes right before the commercials, you'd hear this.
After these messages, we'll be right back. After these messages, we'll be right back.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Yeah.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
So that does it for this Nostalgic Sounds episode. Talk about a trip. I really enjoyed listening to all those sounds again. This is great. And I hope you enjoyed the sound tour of your back in the day. I know that there are tons more sounds to cover, and I probably will one day in another episode. But as far as this one goes, what did you think? Did I miss any? Did I get any of your favorites or unlock any of your audible memories? Let me know. And for anybody wondering about the Nintendo cartridge sound, that was real. That was me blowing in one of my old Nintendo cartridges. It was a game by Rare, the same company that made Donkey Kong Country, and it was called High Speed, world's #1 pinball. And I love that game. Has anybody out there played it? Anybody else own it? Anybody still have it? Is it worth anything? Let me know. Once again, this was a blast. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you guys later. Once again, I just want to say thanks for listening. And as always, you can listen to The Busy Signal everywhere quality podcasts are streamed. Hit the subscribe button to have a new episode delivered directly to your favorite device every other Friday. And if you really enjoy the show, leave a positive review. I don't know what that does, but would this be a real podcast if I didn't ask for that? You can also head over to Instagram and follow the show at Busy Signal Cast for even more Retro-Stalgic content. I share a good amount of stuff that isn't mentioned on the episodes. And while you're there, say hi in the comments. And until next time, remember, reach out and touch the past.